You people think you're owed everything just because life's been unfair to you, Cross sneered. Well, guess what? Life doesn't care. She could have stayed quiet. Most do. But that night, pressed by Bill's shame and one devastating denial, Maren Thorne stood up. Not with fury, but with a pen, a worn folder, and the unbearable clarity of someone who has nothing left to lose. What she uncovered, it wasn't just about her mother, it was about hundreds. Before we dive in, let me know, what time are you listening to this, and where are you? Drop a comment below, we'd love to hear from you. The glass in her hand had a chip along the rim, just enough to catch light when she turned it under the faucet. Water rushed past her fingers, warm and quick, echoing against the stainless steel sink dulled by age. A cough broke the rhythm. From the back room, wet, stubborn, dragging itself out of lungs that had fought too long. Maren didn't flinch, only blinked once and set the glass upside down on the rack. The dish towel over her shoulder had slipped halfway down her back. On the table, a folded bill peeked out from beneath a bottle of generic aspirin. Next to it lay a crumpled prescription note with a scrawl in blue ink. No insurance. Cash only. She pressed her lips together and unlocked her phone. Her brother's face filled the screen, blurry and sleep-eyed. "You paid the bursar?" she asked, voice flat. He nodded. "Yeah, but they said next month's due by, I know. I'll figure it out." "Mare, you sure I said I got it?" She forced a brightness into her smile. He didn't push. When the call ended, Maren stared at the dark screen until it dimmed again. Her grip around the mug whitened her knuckles. Then came one slow breath, and the cup was set down with care, as if sound alone might break it. In her room, the uniform waited: black slacks, black shoes, white shirt, and the kind of apron that made her feel like she belonged to no one and everyone at once. She rifled through her wallet past expired gift cards and old receipts and pulled a limp $5 bill flattened against her transit pass, as if the two could fuse into something greater. Wind tugged her coat sideways. A plastic bag skittered across the sidewalk and caught at the ankle of a man hunched against the wall, his coat more whole than cloth. Maren bent, caught the bag, and handed it back. He blinked up at her, squinting. "You look at me like I'm still here." No reply came, only a small smile before she moved on. The building's old elevator buzzed under fluorescent light, flickering like it couldn't decide whether to hold. Metal walls smelled faintly of bleach and the ghosts of burnt toast. Leaning back, spine against cold steel, Maren closed her eyes for a breath. A jolt. The cab trembled mid-climb. Hair straightened in the reflection of the buttons, strap adjusted on her bag. She stepped out just as the shrill whistle of a passing train echoed through the bricks. The sound trailed her down the block, lingering until it blurred with the hush of a velvet-lined doorway ahead. Crossing the threshold into the gilded elm always felt like brushing past a velvet rope that wasn't meant to move. The double doors gave a quiet sigh as Maren entered, and the shift was immediate. The faint trace of white truffle oil lingered. Overhead chandeliers flickered, like they were lit by memory, not electricity. Jazz chords drifted above the clink of glassware, subtle enough to make you lean in. Beyond the hostess stand, a grand mirror reflected the dining room in rich tones: mahogany tables, blood-red booths, linen so white it looked backlit. Her own figure stood out, too sharp, too plain. Shirt tucked in, too neatly, apron crisp, but lacking the effortless elegance the others wore like second skin. One more Tuesday. In the back hall near the lockers, the staff had already begun their routine. Forks polished in rhythm, menus realigned with precision, jokes whispered with eyes darting. A tray clattered to the floor, no reaction. Table sevens confirmed, a server murmured, blotting lipstick. A pause. "I thought Danny was on that one." He swapped with Ava. Then Ava swapped with Nate. "Did Nate call out sick, stress-induced vertigo?" Someone recited flat. A brief spark of laughter, then nothing. No one volunteered. Elliot Vance entered without knocking, holding the night's assignments. He didn't need to speak much. The room fell still on instinct. He scanned the list. "Maren, you're on 7. Her brow flicked up. "Isn't that—" He cut across. "No changes." The beat between them carried an unspoken weight. She tried again. "Is he difficult?" Elliot met her gaze, weary but steady. "Not difficult. That implies taste. This man," he exhaled through his nose. "This man makes people forget why they began it all." She let it drop. Out front, the rhythm shifted. Movements faster, quieter. A valet jogged toward the entrance as a black Rolls-Royce slid into the loading zone so smooth it looked weightless. Chrome rims caught the dying light, the engine settling into hush rather than growl. From the bar, a bartender muttered, "Ghost cars here." No one laughed. Elliot straightened his collar and crossed to open the front door himself, something he hadn't done all night. Maren waited behind the partition, hands folded beneath her apron. The driver stepped out first, young, sharp-suited posture, taut as a bowstring. He opened the rear door with both hands, head inclined. Respectful or afraid? The man who emerged moved at his own tempo, presence, deliberate as if the room had always belonged to him. Gray wool suit, dark silk scarf, a cane he didn't truly lean on. His gaze traveled across the space like he'd memorized every corner years ago. Conversations thinned mid-sentence. A pour of wine stopped halfway. Maren hadn't heard the name before that night. Harlan Wexley didn't belong to her world. She hadn't grown up with stories of men like him, men who built empires from lawsuits and silence. But the others knew. You could see it in their straighter shoulders, their tighter smiles. "Where's Seven?" she asked under her breath. A server pointed. "Far corner booth, tablecloth already replaced, though the last seating had ended half an hour ago." "Did anyone—" "No one takes it," the girl whispered. "He doesn't eat. He studies." Menus slick beneath her palms, Maren carried them across the carpet. The room seemed to narrow. Conversations didn't fade, they vanished. A fork froze mid-lift. He sat alone, spine tall, one hand resting on the rim of an empty glass. No gesture, just stillness. Through the faint stain on the wine glass, she caught the outline of his eyes, steady, unreadable. Watching, waiting. The menu in her hand dipped. She stayed silent. He didn't turn. Only the jazz band played on a slow riff, climbing the scale, as if uncertain whether to continue. Her throat cleared softly. Nothing. She smoothed the cloth edge with her fingertips. The glass shifted, tilting just enough to be noticed. Acknowledgement or warning. Maren drew one steady breath, the kind she took when the L train screamed past her building at 3 a.m. Her hand reached for the pen tucked into her apron. And then the wine list was gone. The linen at table 7 felt heavier than at the others. Maren flattened it, instinctively corners, sharp, no wrinkle left. The polished window beside the booth mirrored slivers of the Chicago River surface, broken by taxi lights in the crawl of a barge upriver. She set the menu before him. No greeting, no question. Harlan Wexley's hand rested flat on the table, fingers, unmoving, as though cast in stone mid-thought. The menu lay untouched for a beat. Then with one precise motion, he opened it. Maren waited. His voice came low and calm. The steak. Rare, but no blood. She nodded, pen poised. Dry-aged. 35 days. No rosemary, no garlic. Sea salt only. Another nod. Wine Domaine de la Romanée Conti, 2008. 1 glass. She hesitated half a second. No decanter, he added. She didn't ask why. Just wrote. "Anything else this evening, sir?" He looked not fully, not directly, but just enough that she caught the sharp flick of his gaze past the rim of his glass. Silence stretched. "Then I don't make conversation during service." Understood. She stepped back, pivoted, and headed toward the kitchen. Behind her, conversation in the dining room resumed like water rediscovering its flow. Near the service station, Elliot caught her elbow, tugged just enough to pull her out of sight. "You got the steak order?" "Yes. You wrote down no blood." She nodded. "And the wine Domaine de la Romanée Conti, 2008. No decanter." Elliot narrowed his eyes. "He'll notice if the glass is chilled." "I know. Don't let him bait you. He wants to see if you'll improvise." "Don't. I wasn't going to." "Good, then go." But she didn't move. Instead, her fingers brushed the corner of something folded in her apron. A faint rustle as she pulled it free, creased soft from the morning sweat. The prescription note. Her eyes skimmed the scrawled line, her mother's name misspelled, the words, "cash" only underlined. She folded it smaller, tucked it deep into the lining of her apron. Elliot noticed but said nothing. In the kitchen, she repeated the order twice before handing it off. The chef gave a curt nod. No flair, no questions. Maren poured the wine herself. No decanter. Room temperature. 1 glass just under the lip. She lifted it briefly to the light clarity perfect. Her hands didn't shake, not until her reflection flickered in the stem. On her way back, she passed a couple finishing dessert. The man smiled. She didn't see it. Table 7 remained untouched. Wexley sat exactly as before, menu now closed, resting on the far side of the table like it had never been open. She placed the wine in front of him. He didn't move. The bell rang, steak ready. She counted to 5 before retrieving it, smoothing her palms on her apron. The plate was immaculate, dark crust, clean edges, garnished with restraint. She balanced it carefully, left hand, steadying the tray, right adjusting the napkin on her arm. At the booth, she leaned forward and set the dish, precisely aligning it with the placemat. Before she straightened, she noticed a shift, not from him, but from the glass. It tilted. A fraction. Not enough to spill, but enough to draw her eyes. Wexley's gaze wasn't on the steak. It was on her hands. Her hands drew back slowly, then, without thinking, smoothed the corner of the tablecloth she'd disturbed. Habit, muscle memory. Too careful. Turning away, she kept her eyes down. In the window's reflection, his head tilted slightly. Not approval, not curiosity. Something quieter. Watching. Maren slipped into the back corridor where Elliot waited by the espresso machine, arms crossed, silent. Its low hum lingered in her ears as she stepped deeper, only to have it swallowed by a harsher buzz, fluorescent and unrelenting. The Gilded Elms kitchen might as well have belonged to another world. Amber light and velvet hush gave way to glare, insects buzzing in the fixtures, steel clashing against steel in a wordless argument, rare but not red. The head chef's voice cracked across the line like a warning flare. What the hell does that even mean? He slapped the order ticket onto the counter without looking as though offended by its existence. Maren stepped closer, steady. It means seared properly, rested long enough. Warm center. No juices. He stared like she'd asked him to cook with his elbows. It's not a request, it's a contradiction. Not for you. You've done worse for people who tip less. A few chuckles cracked the tension behind her. One of the line cooks raised an eyebrow but kept slicing carrots into matchsticks without missing a beat. The chef wiped his forehead with a towel already stained by the evening's chaos. You're lucky you're polite. I'm lucky you're brilliant. He grunted, turning toward the pan. 3 minutes each side. Nothing more. Nothing less. Maren stepped aside, letting the orchestra resume pans. Hissed knives struck boards in rhythm. Sweat, smoke, butter, and heat thickened the air like a second skin. She didn't wipe her face. Weighted eyes locked on the pass, hands calm. When the steak landed, perfectly centered, garnished with restraint, she lifted the plate as if it carried 1,000 unspoken tests. The carpet swallowed her steps again. Everything had texture. The velvet curtains, the hush of conversation returning like a tide, the steady heartbeat of the Gilded Elms tempo. Wexley sat exactly as before, glass untouched. He didn't glance up when she approached. Plate down, knife aligned. Fingers brushed the charger's edge. 2 paces back, waiting. The first cut slid clean. A sliver rose, disappeared behind an expressionless face. Maren's chest barely rose. A pause. A slow chew. Then, a nod. Not lazy, deliberate. A signal. Her breath eased out. She turned. Miss, he said without looking. Her feet halted on the carpet's edge. I'll take the check. One small hesitation. Of course. She slipped the handwritten slip into the folio, reached for her pen, empty pocket. Wallet tugged free coins, clinking a slip of paper sliding under the table like a flag of surrender. She bent too late. Wexley's hand was already there, emerging with the folded note between 2 fingers. Thin paper softened by too many hands. Her mother's name scrawled at the top. Below the words, no insurance. Cash only. The handwriting was the pharmacist's, cold, mechanical, a receipt of shame. He didn't open it further. He didn't need to. For the first time that evening, his eyes locked with hers. Not past her, not through her. At her. Maren straightened, palm extended. He returned the slip without a word. Her fingers closed around it, tucking it deep into the folio, as if the moment could be erased. She wrote the total, slid the check across. He placed a crisp bill with exactness. No question, no comment, no tip. As he rose, adjusting his cuff, he gave her one last unreadable glance before disappearing through the doors. Stillness pressed in until the hinges sighed shut. Maren smoothed the untouched napkin corner, then turned back toward the kitchen where Elliot waited, arms crossed, a question unspoken in his eyes. The slip wasn't crumpled anymore. Flattened instead, carefully, almost reverently creased lines sharp again, as if someone had pressed intention into the folds before handing it back. "You dropped this." Wexley's voice lingered somewhere between observation and something more brittle. Not empathy, not indifference, just neutral. Too neutral. Maren accepted it in silence. The paper felt heavier now, as though his gaze had written something permanent onto it. Fingers curled tight, she buried it once more in her apron, as if hiding could undo the fact that he had seen. He didn't linger. Turning with the same precision he used for everything else, he walked toward the revolving door. Light from the chandeliers skimmed the sharp edge of his shoulder before the glass rotation carried him out of sight. Maren stayed in the corridor, unmoving. At the far end, Elliot's silhouette appeared half in shadow, half lit by the green glow of the exit sign. "You all right?" His voice carried just enough weight to be ignored if she chose. A quick nod. Too quick. He studied her a second longer than casual, then disappeared behind the swinging door, leaving only the hiss of the espresso machine. The Rolls-Royce idled at the curb. Through the rear view, the driver watched Harlan sink into the back seat. The door clicked shut with finality. Wexley didn't speak right away. He glanced toward the restaurant where a hostess wiped menus with distracted hands, then pulled his phone and tapped a name. Donovan. The line crackled. "I need a background check. The waitress tonight. Table 7. Maren Thorne." A pause. No quiet. Where she lives. Family. Work history. Medical if possible. He pinched the bridge of his nose. "Because I saw something, and I need to know if I imagined it." The call ended. The car slipped into traffic. Back in the staff corridor, Maren leaned against the cold marble wall. The bench creaked as she folded into it, awkward angles, apron heavy on her lap. From its lining, she drew the slip again, creased deeper, now edges blurred where his fingers had touched. She set it on her knee like an offering, then reached for her phone. The inbox loaded slowly on weak Wi-Fi. Top line Mercy West billing update. Action required. Her thumb tapped. The message was plain. 2 paragraphs, no kindness. Total due 9/127 or 45 VAS. Final notice before third-party collection. No plan. No soft phrasing. Just numbers curved like a trap she couldn't outrun. Her lips parted, but no sound came. Sickly green light from the exit sign washed over her skin. The world tunneled into digits and debt. The phone slipped from her grasp, hit the floor with a hollow clack, bounced once, skidded beneath the bench. She didn't reach for it. Not yet. From beyond the wall, a spoon clattered, a glass chimed, laughter sparked faintly, then died. Her breathing slowed. She lowered her forehead to cool stone. It smelled of bleach and citrus cleanliness, masking decay. At last, she bent, retrieved the phone, and pressed the lock button. Black screen. Her own face stared back. On her lap, the slip curled at the corner. No insurance, cash only, shrinking from light. The red signal beyond her window blinked steady as a heartbeat that knew more than it said. Light carved slivers across the cracked plaster ceiling, flashing like a warning caught in rhythm. Below, a freight train thundered past, too close to ignore, too familiar to register. Maren sat at the small table, still in her work pants, an old university hoodie slipping off one shoulder. An empty mug ringed with stale coffee rested by her elbow. The bulb above her buzzed faint amber and tired. Her phone lay face up, black and still, until it lit without sound. Unknown caller. She hesitated, thumb hovering, then answered. "Hello. Good evening, Miss Thorne. This is Julia Dean calling from the offices of Catherine Pearson Associates." The name meant nothing. "We're a legal firm that handles healthcare appeals. Your case was referred this morning by a private sponsor. We've received documentation regarding your mother's denied Medicaid application." Maren's spine stiffened. I never filed an appeal. We understand. The sponsor arranged for us to review it at no charge. We can begin immediately with your permission." She rose halfway, palm braced against the table. I didn't ask for this. Who sent it? I'm afraid they chose to remain anonymous." The pause between them stretched uneven. "We're ready to proceed as soon as you're comfortable. Nothing to sign yet, just a consult to explain your options." Maren blinked twice, then whispered, "Can I call you tomorrow?" "Of course. We're open from 9 to 6. I'll make a note." The line cut, no click, no farewell. She stayed gripping the chair back as though someone might yank it away. The wall's yellowed corners lined with dust seemed to lean closer, listening. Who would do this? No one. No one with reach like that. Except her gaze drifted to the counter. The slip still lay there, creased and defiant. Beside it, her server tag, Marinfo Gold, scratched at the edges. She didn't want to believe it, but her hand had already curled around the phone again. But new message, Elliot. You left in a rush. Everything good? Her thumbs moved, erased, moved again. Just tired, long shift. Delete. Got a weird call. Not sure what to make of it. Delete. Screen dark. She dropped the phone on the couch. Wind from the cracked window stirred the prescription slip. It flapped once, slid to the floor, brushed her shoe and rested. Those words glared up, burned into her mind now. No insurance. Cash only. She bent thumb, pressing the crease softer than before. Too many pockets. Too many hands. And one hadn't been hers. Jaw tight, she traced the letters, hoping for a clue. Nothing. The train's last echo faded into night. The red signal blinked, steady, unbothered. At the sink, she set the slip beside the drying rack, palms flat to cold metal. What unsettled her more, that someone had intervened, or that part of her wanted them to? She closed her eyes, just a breath. Wind stirred again. The red light pulsed across the counter. Behind her, Elliot's message still waited, glowing faint on the screen. Chicago's sky leaned pale, barely blue, soft as wet silk. Mist slid low along the river, smudging towers into charcoal blurs. Maren sat on a bench, hands wrapped around a paper cup gone cold. The wood beneath her stayed damp from last night's rain. At the far end, pigeons shuffled like old men at chess. One hopped onto the armrest, cocked its head. Maren stayed still. Her phone buzzed against her knee. She startled, then answered in a guarded tone. "Hello, Miss Thorne. This is Catherine Pierce." The voice was smooth, polished, measured, professional. "Yes, hi. I wanted to speak to you directly. We've reviewed your mother's paperwork. There's potential for reclassification under an emergency hardship clause. It was overlooked during intake." Maren's straightened eyes fixed on the river's slow ripple. "So, it wasn't final?" "No, not necessarily. There are still steps, but the case is active again, and your sponsor has already covered the preliminary filing fees." I didn't submit those. I know. They asked to remain anonymous." Her heartbeat stumbled unsteady. Catherine pressed on. "The documents are legitimate. Our firm is cleared to proceed at no cost to you. We can meet in person if that helps." Maren whispered, Yes, I'd like that." Friday morning, 10:30, our office in the Loop. You'll get confirmation shortly." "Thank you," she said, half a beat behind her own relief. The call ended. The screen dimmed. Around her, the city was just waking a jogger, past hoodie, damp at the collar. A barge drifted in the distance. A dog barked twice, then fell quiet. Wind shifted sour with gasoline and river algae. She leaned back, face tilted toward the gray light. For once, something had opened instead of shut. Then the shift. Not sound, not shadow. A pressure in the air that made her glance over her shoulder. Across the path, beneath a line of sycamores, a man stood still. Charcoal suit, polished shoes, a phone raised at chest level. Not filming, not scrolling, just holding angled her way. Her stomach knotted. The man didn't move, didn't lower the phone, then turned abruptly and vanished into the tree's coat, fluttering once. Maren rose fast, coffee forgotten. Pigeons scattered in a flurry. She hurried forward, stopped. Gone. The trees had swallowed him. "Hey," she called, not loud but sharp. No answer. A mother with a toddler paused, wary. Maren forced a smile, waved it off. Back on the bench, her hands shook as she pulled up the call log. Only Catherine. No voicemail. A new text arrived. "Unknown number. We know about your mother. Don't worry." Her breath caught. The message sat on the screen, casual, intimate, as if written by someone who'd known her since childhood. She scanned the park again, more joggers, an old man scattering breadcrumbs, a couple murmuring near the fountain. Nothing out of place, no black suits, no lenses. And yet, she locked the phone. Her reflection shimmered faintly in the glass-distorted mouth, set not in fear, but something colder the moment before realization hardens. A breeze tugged her hair. One pigeon returned, landing at her feet. She stayed still. The phone buzzed again, only a calendar alert for her shift tomorrow. She ignored it, eyes fixed on the space where the man had stood, mist curling between the trunks. The elevator whispered to a stop on the 14th floor, polished walls splintering her reflection into thin slivers. Maren stepped out, clutching her bag shoes, soundless on slate tiles. A soft chime faded down the hall. Pearson Langley was etched into frosted glass, a head backlit, like both warning and promise. The place was hushed expensive. Lavender mingled faintly with old paper. Light spilled from floor-to-ceiling windows, bleaching the edges of minimalist furniture. A receptionist lifted her head in greeting, then gestured toward the inner office. Catherine Pierce stood at the far end, tall and controlled in charcoal wool. Her smile was efficient, not warm. "Maren, come in." The chair across from her was softer than expected. Maren sat carefully as though it might remember how she moved. "I've reviewed everything." Catherine began, flipping through a file so clean it looked untouched. "Your mother should have qualified under the amended 2019 provisions. There's precedent, but her application was flagged as misfiled, wrong diagnostic category, no appeal, follow-up case closed in under 2 weeks." Maren frowned. "So, they rejected it because someone ticked the wrong box. That's the official reason." In the unofficial one, Catherine set the file down, tone sharpening. "She's older. She's poor. She has no legal representation. And she's white, living in a predominantly black district. Bureaucracy doesn't need to be malicious. It just needs to be lazy." Maren stayed quiet. Catherine pressed on. "We can reopen the case. We have legal grounds. But we'll need to file a secondary claim against the insurer for negligent processing. That part will get ugly." "How ugly?" "Subpoenas, depositions, possibly federal review. You'll need to sign temporary power of attorney for the medical records. And if it goes public, there will be media interest." Maren's voice steadied. "What about the cost?" Catherine leaned back, arms folding loosely. "A benefactor has committed to covering initial fees and outside consultants." She blinked. "Who they've asked to remain unnamed." Maren's fingers curled into her coat. "You're saying someone I don't know is paying lawyers to sue a billion-dollar company on my behalf? I'm saying someone believes your mother's life matters, and they're willing to fund that belief." "Is it?" She stopped. Her voice caught on the edge of a name she hadn't spoken aloud. Catherine only smiled, small, unreadable. "Let's just say, some people carry more than wealth. They carry guilt." The words lingered in the office like steam on glass. By the time Maren left the tower, the city had shifted. Light cut harder now, wind knife sharper between buildings. She joined the tide heading north. Horns bleated somewhere far off. Her breath fogged as she passed street vendors setting up for lunch. At the edge of the crowd, someone paused. Gray overcoat, upright posture, one hand fixed on a briefcase handle. She didn't see his face, only the silhouette reflected in a hotel's mirrored facade. But the tilt of his head, the stillness, the way he stood as if listening without turning, tugged at her memory. The man from the park. Before she could cross, the light changed. A bus lumbered past. He vanished, gone when she reached the curb. Her pace quickened, pulse climbing. Passing windows caught fragments of her reflection, tight shoulders, unfocused eyes, a mouth held too rigid. By the time she descended into the subway, the platform's hum drowned thought. A violinist played near the stairs, minor key, tentative, fragile. She boarded near the back, slid into a seat by the window. Her face shimmered in the glass overlaying the tunnel's dark blur. And then behind that reflection, 3 rows back, gray wool cap, straight back stillness, eyes fixed, not on a phone, not out the window, angled toward her. Her head snapped sideways. He didn't move, didn't blink, just sat. The train lurched forward. Fluorescence flickered overhead, steadied again. He was still there, watching. Karen Fidelity's reception felt scrubbed too clean, air filtered until nothing living lingered. Every surface gleamed, chrome signage, marble tiles, the sleek black glass of the security desk. A mechanical hum leaked from the vents, broken only by the staccato of heels clicking behind frosted doors. Maren followed Catherine into the waiting area. Seats were sculpted but stiff, designed for those who wouldn't stay or wouldn't return. A receptionist with hair lacquered into a perfect twist asked for their names without lifting her eyes. Catherine gave hers crisp and measured. They were told to wait. Maren adjusted the cuff of her coat fingers, brushing the strap of her bag again and again. A large steel sculpture rose in the center of the lobby, twisting metal abstract, maybe meant to suggest balance. It looked like something that wanted to fall, but wasn't allowed to. She shifted her gaze and froze. A man had entered through the revolving doors, coat unbuttoned, dark tie neatly in place. He didn't move like the others. His smile was practiced, pleasant enough to disarm, but his eyes, though, scanned the room with calculation, measuring which people mattered and which didn't. He spotted them, came closer. "Miss Thorne, isn't it?" Catherine stood before Maren could rise. "Lyndon Cross." He offered a handshake, but without warmth. Still trading in principles, Catherine still diluting them, I see. Cross chuckled and turned to Maren, ignoring the jab. "I believe I've seen you before. You work at the Gilded Elm, don't you?" She nodded, uncertain how to respond. Cross tilted his head, amused by some private irony. "Funny, isn't it? Used to be people worked for years to earn what they have. Now everyone wants compensation for existing." Catherine's jaw tightened. "She's here to file on behalf of her mother, who was denied necessary treatment due to your company's misclassification. You're aware of the case?" His smile never shifted. "We're aware of all active claims. I trust you'll find our legal team responsive and thorough." He turned, then paused. To think a waitress would come knocking at Karen's doors with such confidence. Times really have changed. Without waiting for a reply, he walked into the inner offices. Maren stared after him. She wasn't sure whether her spine had frozen or burned. Her hands curled tight in her lap. Catherine placed a steady palm on her shoulder. "That man has made a career out of denying dignity. Don't let his tone make you question what you're doing." Maren nodded, but her gaze lingered on the wall where Cross had stopped a gala photo in brushed silver. Tuxedos, pearl champagne raised mid-toast. Legacy, power, permanence. Two men stood near the center. One was clearly a younger Cross, less gray, same steel posture. The other wore a softer smile, but angled himself slightly away from the camera, reluctant. Something about that face tugged at her memory. She leaned in. Catherine followed her gaze. "You know him. I think that's Henry Lawton. He defended the driver who hit the Wexleys." Catherine blinked, then looked again. "He changed firms decades ago, became a judge, retired under some quiet scandal. And he stood next to Cross at a Karen gala." Maren's words barely carried. Back in his office, Lyndon Cross peeled off his gloves and tossed them onto the desk. He didn't sit. He lifted the landline, pressed a button without looking. "Who's funding the Pierce claim against us?" His tone was flat. "I want every detail. Political ties, nonprofit fronts, everything." A pause, no. Discreetly. "I don't want to spook them yet." He hung up, walked to the bar cart, poured a glass of something pale and expensive. Left it untouched. The city stretched before him like a chessboard. One corner of his mouth twitched. Downstairs, the elevator doors closed on Maren and Catherine. Neither spoke for several floors. The silence traveled with her until nightfall carried through steel and glass, down to brick and grease. The alley behind the Gilded Elm was narrow, stained with years of steam and oil. Maren leaned against the wall, unlit cigarette between her fingers. It was ritual more than habit, something to ground her, an illusion of control. She never lit it. Above, a plane scratched a pale line across the sky. Footsteps approached, uneven and familiar. She didn't look up. Elliot stopped beside her, rubbing his temples. His shirt hung half untucked, tie knotted too tight, strangling him from within. "You got a minute?" She nodded, the cigarette still untouched. "They sent it to corporate first," he said. "Then down to us." Maren's brow creased. "Who Karen Fidelity?" "Legal department." "It's formal. Accusation of inappropriate access to employee records and potential breach of client confidentiality." He hesitated. "They're implying the restaurant facilitated something unethical." Maren's throat tightened. "What does that have to do with me?" Elliot pulled a printout from his coat pocket. His fingers trembled slightly, stress, anger, or both. Her name was there. Full block letters, subject of concern. A brief description followed waitstaff assigned to VIP Table 7, then formed a non-disclosed personal relationship with a guest now linked to an external legal dispute involving company interests. Beneath that, a paragraph about potential risk to company image and grounds for internal review. Her hands gripped the paper's edge. I didn't tell them anything, Elliot said quickly. I don't know how they even got half of this. But it's official. HR will call. A hard blink. They think I'm sleeping with him. They're trying to smear you. That's how this works. The silence between them hovered like a wasp waiting for one wrong move. I should quit, she whispered, voice catching. Elliot didn't argue. He looked at her, really looked, and said, whatever you decide, make sure it's because you believe it's right, not because you're scared. That night, the apartment was dim lit only by a cheap lamp flickering beside the couch. Her mother slept in the recliner, Bible open across her lap, glasses askew. The muted TV hummed with static. Maren tiptoed in, slid the book free, and folded a page to mark the spot. Weariness in her mother's face was sharper than any accusation in a boardroom. Prayer and unpaid bills had carved lines deeper than time should allow. At the kitchen table, her laptop glowed. A draft email blinked on the screen. Subject line, withdrawal from claim. Fingers hovered over the keys, then curled into fists. Her reflection ghosted across the screen. Dark circles, lips pressed so tight they'd lost color. She exhaled slowly and opened her inbox. One new message. From Catherine Pierce, subject, urgent. Response needed within 48 hours. Cross has petitioned the court for summary dismissal. He's citing reputational harm and abusive process. We have 48 hours to submit an objection, or the case will be closed permanently. I know this is fast. Call me when you can. The weight of it settled like wet concrete in her chest. A train wailed in the distance, familiar, almost comforting. Tonight it sounded less like escape and more like warning. She reached for the cupboard without thinking. Tea kettle, mug, a box of chamomile with the corner torn. Something scraped against the tile. The Quran letter had slipped from the folder, landing face up at her foot. Maren Bent studied the lines again, her name, their assumptions, the cold precision of legal language dressed as neutrality. Her gaze drifted back to the laptop's glow. From the couch, her mother stirred, murmured something inaudible. The kettle hissed quietly, not yet boiling. She didn't sit. Crossing the carpet steps, measured as though the floor might crack. She pulled out her phone. A text preview lit the screen. Catherine. Let me know if you're still in. I'll fight if you do. Her thumb hovered. No reply. Not yet. Instead, she set the phone down, eyes on the letter again. Her name turned into evidence, something taken without her consent. Something maybe never meant to be theirs. The room was colder than necessary. Fluorescent lights buzzed softly above a conference table polished too bright for sincerity. Windows stretched across one wall, headlights trailing through the glass like ghost lines scrawled in anger. Maren sat beside Catherine, back rigid, hands locked tight in her lap. A pitcher of water waited untouched at the center of the table. Two paper cups, one tilted slightly, drew her eye. Across from them, Lyndon Cross adjusted his cuffs with the ease of someone who had rehearsed victory. His charcoal suit fit perfectly. His smile did not. A legal assistant leaned close, whispered, and he gave a small nod, eyes fixed on Maren. A court liaison entered, took her seat, began the procedural acknowledgement. Catherine leaned forward, voice steady. We're filing to reopen claim 3267W denial on basis of improper diagnostic categorization, supported by medical affidavit and post-denial correspondence. The liaison jotted notes. You'll need compelling grounds to bypass administrative closure. We have them, Catherine replied, sliding the file across. No apology in her tone. Cross reached for his own folder, then paused. Before we waste court time, I'd like to establish the credibility of this claim. His voice was buttered steel, pleasant, on the surface edge beneath. He flipped open the document. Maren Thorne, waitstaff at the Gilded Elm. 2 unpaid credit accounts, 1 flagged delinquent. Denied for a student loan co-signed 3 years ago. Hardship deferment on utilities last winter. Her jaw locked. Catherine started to interject, but Cross raised one finger. I mention this not to discredit Ms. Thorne, but to clarify a pattern. If Karen Fidelity is to be accused of misconduct, the individual bringing such a claim must be deemed trustworthy financially and legally. Her record raises questions. Catherine shot up sharp. She's not a plaintiff, Mr. Cross. She's a daughter. He tilted his head, feigning thought. Yes, and she's also, by her own admission, the party submitting communication on her mother's behalf. That makes her a functional proxy, doesn't it? The air thickened. Maren met his gaze, pulse thudding in her ears. I'm not a proxy, she said low but firm. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not trying to be. I just won't sit quietly while someone tells my mother she doesn't matter because we don't earn enough. Stillness followed. Cross leaned back, adjusting his watch. Passion is admirable, Ms. Thorne. But in this room, we deal in policy and precedent. You'll need more than belief to move this forward. He stood, signaled to his assistant, and left without another glance. The liaison tapped her pen. A formal ruling will follow in 48 hours. You'll be notified. In the elevator, neither Catherine nor Maren spoke. At the lobby, marble echoing their steps, they parted at the revolving door. Catherine's final words, "We'll respond." But he's trying to make it personal. Don't let him. Chicago's wind cut sharp across the street. Maren walked on, thoughts looping Cross's tone, the disdain under courtesy, the way he said deserve like it was a privilege. A black sedan idled at the curb. Harlan Wexley leaned against it, arms crossed, wool coat draped over his shoulders, like it had belonged there forever. She stopped. You're not exactly subtle. Subtlety never got me much, he said, a flicker of humor, ghosting his mouth. What do you want? His gaze studied her, weighing exhaustion against defiance. Cross ruined everything I had once. Behind closed doors, with the same smile you saw today. I let it happen because I thought I couldn't be touched. And now you want revenge? No. He straightened. I want it not to happen again. Don't walk back into this alone. He opened the passenger door. Didn't push. Traffic rumbled. The word deserve echoed in her head. Her hand rested on the frame, not climbing in, not walking away. The cafe's door chime whispered as Maren entered. Tucked between the city's hard edges, it felt like an island of quiet. Antique sconces spread soft light over scarred wood tables. She slid into the booth across from Wexley. He looked out at the dark street before turning back to her. Cross and I share a past, he said evenly. Steam curled between their mugs. More than you could imagine. She raised an eyebrow. You two knew each other. He nodded once slowly. Before your case, before any of this. During the original Wexley trial. His voice paused as though tasting the memory. Cross was brought in as junior counsel. He argued influence. Negotiation. Quiet resolution. I resisted. Her heart tapped a warning. Quiet resolution? Yes. His fingers tapped the rim of his cup. It was the deal-maker's route. Less exposure, less threat to institutional reputations. The defendant's lawyer pushed it. Cross, he was young, ambitious, sought to shape outcome without wreckage. The jukebox in the corner hummed over and faded into static. Maren swallowed. So he suggested a plea or settlement. Wexley's eyes darkened. He urged the man's release in exchange for silence, minimal accountability. That the hearings be sealed, the records locked. I refused. I insisted on full trial transparency, testimony accountability. She imagined it, the contrast, a courtroom lit by relentless cameras and a courtroom hidden in shadows. She thought of her mother's denied claims, of all the forms crossed out or ignored. Wexley leaned back. I almost walked away from everything that day, but I promised myself I would never let fear dictate justice again. Maren's fingers fisted on the tablecloth. And now I'm the one being dragged into all of that. His voice softened. You're not a pawn. You're a person worthy of the fight. He paused, then added, but you should know what you're facing. In the window behind him, streetlight flickered. His reflection overlaid moving shadows. She watched both image and man blending. Resuming, Wexley said Cross benefited from deals like those. He built his power with them. Quiet maneuvers, backroom agreements, systems that protect the strong. This situation with you, it's a pattern. One he's perfected. Maren drew in a slow breath. Then why help me now to settle old scores? He met her eyes, maybe partly that, but mostly because I saw in you a refusal to stay silent. and perhaps you deserve better than anonymity in your own life. She exhaled through her nose. The sentiment was fragile, dangerous. She wasn't certain which part she believed. The waitress refilled Wexley's mug. He nodded his thanks. Maren tasted hers bitter familiar. He rose quietly. Don't take this all on your own. At the door he paused. I'll walk you out. Cold damp met them as they stepped onto slick pavement. Street lamps glowed, throwing pale halos across the block. Ahead, the hospital loomed its tall windows, dark but watchful. She stopped short. Across the curb, Cross stood motionless. Coat drawn close, head raised, gaze pinned on her. His posture didn't waver, eyes sharp under the passing headlights. Cars slowed. He turned once, shifted back, then slipped into a waiting vehicle. The door closed with precision. Tires whispered against asphalt until only red taillights remained, then nothing. Maren stayed frozen, dread lingering where he had been. Her breath hitched. Wexley stood just behind, silent. He's everywhere, she murmured. His frown tightened. He's powerful. We always knew that. They walked back slowly, lamps bending their reflections in puddles. Wexley pushed the cafe door open. Maren lingered at the threshold for one heartbeat longer, then followed. The kitchen faucet dripped steady as a metronome. Bent over the counter, she scrubbed until copper gleamed detergent, stinging her eyes. In the faint sheen of steel, her reflection wavered, same young woman worn thin. Her thumb slid open the phone's recorder. A snippet of her mother's laughter spilled out, fragile, bright, unanchored. Then a cough, a door closing. Finally, no matter what happens, don't lose your kindness. The words floated in her mind, suspended between sorrow and strength. Eyes shut, she held fast to that ember. Not vengeance, defense. On the floor, manila folders waited. 12 in all. One labeled billing anomalies, another denied claims appeal history. Pages spread across the table, edges squared with care. Somewhere inside, the truth hid, waiting to be coaxed out. Under the halogen lamp, Maren retyped her mother's medical records, cross-referenced diagnosis codes, flagged discrepancies, 3 pages, where consults were rejected without cause, 2 where imaging had been denied despite matching the prescribed code. Notes filled the margins. See 2018 revision, missing signature, year 722. Chain of approval breaks here. Her pen skated a rhythm across the paper until dawn's gray edge touched the windows. A message flashed across the phone. From Catherine Pierce. They granted our motion. Discovery permitted. We can move forward. Relief pooled low in her chest. She read it twice before fingers blurred over the screen. Thank you, she whispered, though no one heard. The kettle whistled. Steam spiraled into the rising light as water filled 2 mugs. She pressed a palm against the cool glass of the window. The sky had paled, not night, not yet day. Below, a bus idled, its low hum carrying upward. Roofline softened, skyline damp fog. Everything seemed sharper in that half-light. Back at the table, folders stacked neatly. She zipped the satchel with deliberate patience, the click sealing hours of labor. Yet one folder slid back open, as if daring her to find what still lay hidden. A margin note caught her eye. A signature. Something off. Fingers traced the marks, slowly searching. Too many hands had touched this file. Someone wanted it buried. A train hissed past outside, rattling the window pane. Cold air pressed faintly through the walls. Hands folded in her lap, she sat while expectation filled the silence. The folder shifted, spilling one prescription slip onto the table's edge. It fluttered to the floor. No insurance, cash only. Creased, worn, unignorable. It had followed her everywhere, into shadows, hearings, Cross's gaze. For now, she left it there. Light fractured across the table, catching her name. On file headers blurred from repetition, foreign now. Breath steadied against the weight in her chest. Her throat ached. Would rage or resolve carry her further? Leaning back, she stretched. The mug of coffee cooled beside her, steam rising in faint spirals. The kettle quieted. Silence reclaimed the room. At last she rose, cracked the window wider. A breeze entered pavement, impossibility, and the curtain stirred. She let it. Sunlight carved the kitchen in halves, papers, chairs, her own outline sharpened. Both hands rested on the folder. Nails cracked, veins, stark skin dry. Hands that had carried grief and now responsibility. A car rolled by on the street. Headlights flicked across the glass, sudden and brief. She gasped softly, then closed the folder, slipping it into her bag. Floorboards creaked as she crossed the room. The prescription slip remained abandoned behind her. At the doorway, she paused, light spilling across her shoulders. She left it open. To brightness, to the rising day, to whatever waited. Arms steady, heart braced, purpose renewed. The courtroom felt colder than usual. Under harsh white lights, every edge cut sharper, every breath a little harsher. Maren's folder rested on the wooden desk. Fingers hovered above it, ready. Attorneys rustled papers, a stenographer tapped steady rhythm, and the judge's gavel waited like a sleeping hammer. Catherine rose, advancing to the lectern. "Your Honor," she began, voice measured. "Exhibit D shows a pattern of alterations in my client's medical records, changes to diagnostic codes, initials that never existed, timestamps shifted. These edits weren't clerical, they were deliberate." She turned the pages toward the bench. "We assert that Mr. Cross authorized or knew of these modifications." Her gaze locked on Cross. He stayed seated, arms folded, impassive, as if accusation couldn't touch him. The judge lowered his glasses. "Counselor, you accuse a high-ranking executive of intentional tampering. Do you have admissible proof?" Catherine nodded. "Invoices signed in Cross's name, email trails with metadata, internal memos, marked Review by LC. Expert testimony confirms the changes violate standardized protocols." The room shifted. Lawyers leaned forward. Cross's assistant swallowed hard behind polished wood. Cross rose, smoothing his jacket with careful hands. "Your Honor, Karen, fidelity follows process. Frequently claims undergo contextual review. Adjustments happen. That does not equate to misconduct. If there are errors, they remain within acceptable margins." His voice controlled, persuasive. A pause, his eyes swept the room. "We do not concede that flawed policy equals guilt. Bureaucratic oversight is not a crime." Maren's pulse thundered. Breath steadied, recalling nights spent awake, certain the system itself was designed to grind people down. Catherine pressed on. "Your Honor, process can be weaponized. Opaque rules hide final decisions behind confidential walls. Protocol cannot excuse denial of life-saving care. This case isn't about paperwork, it's about dignity, survival." The gavel tapped once, soft but commanding. "Sufficient grounds for trial. Karen Fidelity is ordered to produce all coding files, emails involving Mr. Cross, or his office drafts of denial notices and records of revised claims. We will proceed to full discovery. Any obstruction will bring penalty." Gasps rippled among the spectators. Cross's shoulders stiffened, eyes tightening at the corners. Maren closed her folder, slowly, hands steady now. Months of fear and resolve pressed forward with her. As she reached the exit, Cross's voice followed. "Ms. Thorne." Steps halted. He drew closer, words quiet as silk masking steel. "You think this ends tonight? I will not forget what you said." Her head lifted. "Neither will I," she answered, calm. Their eyes held. Cross adjusted his posture, then walked away. Courtroom doors shut behind him with finality. Air rushed from her lungs, long and hollow. Catherine joined her in the corridor, afternoon light filtering through high windows, shadows stretching over marble floors. Beyond the doors, reporters stirred, voices rising like restless current. Maren's steps carried her forward, heels clicking against tile. No glance backward, only forward. The fight had just begun. Wooden pews creaked as Maren shifted, steadying her mother into the corner seat near the aisle. Afternoon light fractured through stained glass, scattering blues and crimson arcs across stone. From the front, the organ hummed notes, drifting into the air, like old perfume that refused to fade. Her mother's hand trembled slightly in her grasp. Despite treatments, unpaid balances, the slow erosion of health, she still came with hair brushed, neatly scarf-pinned, just right. The pew was hard, unforgiving, yet her posture held proud. When the priest's voice dwindled into closing hymns, the congregation lingered in stillness. A hush, not solemnity, something gentler settled. Her mother's grip tightened. Then in a whisper, "You kept your promise." Maren didn't reply. But child. Eyes searched her face. "What do you keep for yourself?" The question didn't sting. It echoed deeper than expected. Later, after helping her into the rideshare, Maren lingered in the sanctuary's back rows. Stained glass had shifted tone, gold bleeding into lilac. She sat again, cushions carrying faint traces of beeswax and polished wood comfort worn but intact. From her coat pocket came an old photo, her father laughing arms looped around both children, all three squinting into sun. Her mother had taken it days before the accident. His watch still ticked faintly in a drawer unworn. Only then did she recognize how much of life had been survival on reflex. Running toward danger if it shielded someone she loved. Shrinking in rooms where presence meant little. Every choice since his death traced the same pattern. Bill's hospital chairs, the careful silences at work. Always for others. By the time she reached her apartment, street lamps flickered on. Neon from the diner across the road pulsed through blinds. She slipped into a soft sweatshirt, dimmed the kitchen, and sat at the counter with an old spiral notebook. Not her phone, not the laptop. Words came slowly. Not list, not plan, not journal. A letter to herself. Maren, you think you were built to carry, but maybe you were made to breathe too. You are not a debt to repay, not a system to outsmart, not a name they get to define. She paused. The handwriting felt foreign as though reflected through someone else's eyes. The pen hovered, then continued. You are more than survival. You are allowed joy. You are allowed peace. You are allowed to stop fighting, even just long enough to rest. Folding the page carefully, she tucked it into an old tin box, once for tea bags, now for receipts, thumbtacks, a lake photo with her brother. The lid clicked shut. No dramatics, no ceremony, just quiet release. Blanket pulled over her lap, head against the couch, her breath slowed. The radiator ticked faintly. A train's low hum slipped past the window. Not panic anymore, only presence. Eyes closed. Dreams came without monitors, without overdue notices, without dark suits in corridors. Only silence and sleep, deep, undisturbed. Rows of rigid back chairs filled the courtroom, nearly every seat taken. Reporters leaned forward, pens, tapping in rhythm with each crest of tension. Behind them waited quieter figures, patients in wheelchairs, elderly couples with trembling hands, parents clutching worn folders. The gallery wasn't crowded with curiosity, but with people who had lived variations of the same hidden fight. Catherine Pierce stood before the judge, documents balanced neatly at the podium. Her voice didn't rise. It held steady as she detailed the pattern, names, dates, diagnostic codes. Then she opened a new folder, tone shifting from clinical to deliberate. These are internal denials, she said, lifting a page. All from care and fidelity. Every claim rejected through misclassification. Not one appealed, not one reversed. Not because they lacked merit, but because no one strong enough stood behind them. Gasps rustled through the room as a projection flickered to life. Grainy text stretched across the courtroom screen, sent March 3rd, 2021. From L Cross to Executive Claims Department, subject Q1 projections. Body proceed with bulk denials per code red flag system. Expedite review. Revise only if necessary. Stillness followed, not theatrical, simply heavy. Catherine broke it. This wasn't clerical error. It was directive. When Maren was called, palms pressed flat to the barrier, knuckles pale. No notes in hand, no tremor in her voice. My mother was denied coverage because someone decided her diagnosis didn't fit. No call, no visit, just rejection. Her gaze didn't search for sympathy. It landed on Cross. He adjusted his tie jaw taut. She has late-stage autoimmune disease. She worked in a bakery 20 years. She never asked for help. She didn't even know how to. I'm not here for pity or even compensation. I'm here because she matters. Because the system is broken and people like her vanish if we let them. Cross shifted again, clearing his throat. The judge leaned forward. Counselor, do you have proof this directive involved Mr. Cross directly? Catherine signaled her paralegal, who connected a flash drive. Charts filled the screen, rows of names, codes, outcomes. Then a final email, Cross's approval signature, attached to a spreadsheet of rejections, handwritten notes, tallying financial impact per denial. This wasn't oversight, Catherine said. It was policy. The judge needed no further questions. Within minutes, the ruling came. An independent audit would begin. Cross was suspended pending investigation. Maren's mother's case reopened along with dozens of others. As she walked past him, Cross kept his eyes on the floor, lips drawn tight, a tremor breaking the mask at his jawline. Rain had started soft, steady, patient. Maren stepped into it without pulling her coat closer. Droplets landed sharp against her shoulders, blouse clinging. It wasn't discomfort, it was presence. She let it soak in. Around her, pedestrians darted beneath umbrellas, briefcases lifted high. She stayed exposed, breathing in the smell of rain and pavement. A delivery driver pressed a dry napkin into her hand. She thanked him, tucking it into her palm, not to wipe her face, but to hold warmth. No reason to rush anymore. Late morning light spread across a wide wooden desk, warming its surface, casting slow shadows from a dangling fern. Maren sat behind it, sleeves rolled pencil, tapping lightly against a folder marked New Intakes. Fresh paint and lemon oil lingered in the air, unfinished, yet promising. Beyond the arched windows, the river moved steadily, cutting the city into bands of brightness and reflection. The office buzzed in quiet motion. A delivery man wheeled in boxes of tea and paper. A young woman pinned a sign above the hallway that read, "Advocacy, not charity." The space still held echoes, footsteps on bare floors, the soft creak of shifting furniture, but it was no longer empty. Elliot appeared in the doorway, his jacket folded over one arm, a rolled-up blueprint tucked under the other. He placed it gently on Maren's desk, smoothing the edges. "New layout for the consultation wing," he said. "More space for privacy and a garden bench facing the water." She traced the outline with her finger. "That was your idea," he shrugged. "You mentioned some clients might need to sit with things a while before talking. Figured they deserved somewhere better than a waiting chair." A quiet knock turned their heads. Wexley stood at the threshold, no tailored suit today, just a navy sweater collar, open eyes softer than either of them had seen before. He nodded once and stepped forward, gaze drifting to the window, where two ducks paddled near the far bank. They didn't talk about trials or headlines. They didn't mention cross or settlements. They simply stood around the map of rooms and possibilities and discussed the logistics of coffee machines and case folders and the best place to install soft lighting. In the kitchenette, Maren's mother poured steaming water into mismatched ceramic mugs. Her movements were slow but sure, her grip firmer than weeks ago. Her lips curled into a smile as she watched her son barefoot and grinning crouched under the router with a screwdriver between his teeth. "We'll have Wi-Fi by lunch," he announced. Maren left her chair and walked down the hallway, fingers brushing lightly along the smooth edge of each empty desk. The hallway still echoed with every step. Each cubicle had a nameplate waiting to be written, a future printed intake form, not yet filled, a story not yet told. She paused at the last desk. A window nearby overlooked the street below, where pedestrians hurried along in the light breeze. The hum of buses, conversations, and birdsong filtered in faintly through a cracked pane. She looked back at the room, the voices growing behind her. It wasn't silent anymore. The front door opened with the soft chime of a new bell. A young woman stepped in, hesitated near the threshold, her coat still damp at the hem. Her voice barely rose above a whisper. "I heard this place helps people like my mother." Maren returned to the front of the room without hurrying. She offered a gentle nod and pulled out a chair from the round table near the reception window. "Sit with me," she said, voice quiet but clear. The woman lowered herself into the seat, eyes flicking around, unsure if she was allowed to hope yet. Maren reached for her notebook, flipped to a clean page, uncapped her pen. "Tell me her story," she said, setting the pen to paper, ready to listen. Justice doesn't always roar in courtrooms or arrive wrapped in headlines. Sometimes it whispers through the steady voice of someone refusing to be invisible. Maren never sought to be a hero. She simply chose not to look away, and in doing so, she became the kind of person who sees others, truly sees them. May we carry that with us. See someone today, listen today, even when it's hard, especially then.